Number 1. Immurement. Latin for within the wall. The victim was placed into a narrow cell, often standing, with only a sliver of light. Then, brick by brick, the exit was sealed. Death didn't come from the wall. It came from the weight. Suffocation, dehydration, madness. Often, they left a single tube for bread and water, stretching the agony to weeks. The Vestal Virgins of Rome were buried alive this way for breaking their vows. Their last sound was not screaming, but the scratching of rats and the final click of the last brick.
Number 2, the garrote. Spain's so-called humane alternative to hanging. The victim sat on a wooden stool with their neck locked into an iron ring. Behind them, an executioner turned a crank. With each turn, a spike drove into the spinal cord. But if the executioner was weak or cruel, he would turn slowly. First, the victim chokes. Then the vertebrae crack one by one. It was not strangulation. It was screwing the soul out of the flesh. It took up to 20 minutes. Sometimes the head popped off, sometimes it just dangled.
Number 3. Hanging by the rib. Used by the Ottomans and the Mughals. They did not hang you by the neck. That is too fast. They hooked a blunt iron spike under your 4th or 5th rib. Then they lifted you. Your full body weight pulls down. The rib does not break cleanly. It tears through the intercostal muscle. Every breath feels like a knife twisting. You cannot pass out from lack of oxygen. You can breathe fine. The pain is pure physics. You hang there for hours, sometimes days. Vultures eat your feet while you are still looking at them.
Number 4, lingqi, the death by 1,000 cuts. China's masterpiece of sorrow. The goal was not to kill fast. The goal was to kill last. The condemned was tied to a wooden frame with a basket of knives nearby. Small knives. The executioner started with the chest. One cut, a flap of skin. They removed the flesh in coin-sized pieces. To prevent bleeding out, they cauterized wounds with oil or gunpowder. Victims lived for 3, 4, sometimes 8 hours. By the final cut, the victim was a skeleton with eyes. Sometimes they were fed their own flesh. Number 5, scaphism, the boats. Invented by the Persians, this is the most bizarre death on this list. The victim was stripped naked and forced into a hollowed-out log, or between 2 boats, with only their head, hands, and feet sticking out. They were force-fed milk and honey until they had violent diarrhea. Then, more honey was smeared all over their face, genitals, and armpits. Left floating in a stagnant swamp, the insects came first. Flies laid eggs in their eyes, then wasps, then maggots hatched inside their own feces. The victim was not killed by the blade. They were eaten.
Number 6, the blood eagle. The Viking saga's ultimate sacrifice, reserved for the bravest enemies. The executioner cut a vertical line down the victim's back, then broke every rib at the spine. Using hooks, they pulled the ribs outwards through the back skin. The lungs, still breathing, were pushed through the gaps, looking like white, bloody wings. The final step was rubbing salt into the exposed lungs. Historians debate whether it really happened, but if it did, the victim was alive for the entire wing spread. The sagas say they did not scream. They had to stay silent to enter Valhalla. Number 7, hanged, drawn, and quartered. England's final answer to treason. First, the victim was hanged until almost dead. Consciousness was key. Then, they were laid on a table. Their stomach was cut open. Their intestines were pulled out while they watched. Then came the horses. 4 horses were attached to the 4 limbs and lashed in different directions. The ropes tightened. The joints popped.
The skin stretched like taffy. Eventually, the arms and legs ripped off, but not at the same time. The head usually stayed attached to the torso. Finally, the head was cut off and the pieces were boiled.